Yes, I can hear already.
Okay. Good afternoon and welcome, everybody. Ibu Valerie, Julian, and Your Excellency Cameron McKay, Canadian Ambassador to Indonesia and Timor-Leste. Ibu Valerie is, of course, the
Recording
resident
in progress.
coordinator for Indonesia. Distinguished speakers and participants, welcome to this afternoon's dialogue, Valuing Tropical Landscapes Finance, Lessons and Opportunities in Indonesia. This dialogue is hosted by UNEP, TLFF, ADM Capital, ICRAF, and BNP Paribas with support from Global Affairs Canada. When it comes to important tropical landscapes in terms of Earth's climate and biodiversity in Indonesia, this is the largest archipelago with more than 17,000 islands, and it is endowed with extreme wealth. Our rainforests host 10% of all known planet species, 12% of mammal species, and 17% of bird species. Furthermore, our forests provide livelihoods for 50 to 60 million people. Many of these are some of the most vulnerable communities in Indonesia. However, a major question all stakeholders in Indonesia, from the government to the business, to the communities and civil society, face and are compelled to address in this day and age is how can we build robust economies that are strong in terms of financial, social, and ecological returns in a sustainable way. From a climate and biodiversity perspective, addressing this question positively is unnegotiable. The TLFF was established a few years back to address this question, and it has also been able to make one big investment for a company who is restoring two very degraded landscapes into a sustainable rubber plantation. But along the years, it has been clear that there has been challenges in finding bankable long-term green investment opportunities among the players in Indonesia. Through this webinar, we aim to inform key stakeholders of support from Global Affairs Canada to the TLFF Grant Fund, which will be a component that provides support or helps the TLFF to ensure that more projects in the future will be able to be brought to a bankability standard. Distinguished participants, we have the pleasure today of a wonderful panel of experts who will help us to understand the impact of financing to tackle climate change and biodiversity conservation on how the TLGF facility, as supported by the Global Affairs Canada, can help to pave the way for greater impact in the future. So we will be looking at what TLFF has already been doing and can achieve, and also be introduced to get to know better the TLGF. For this, we have a panel of speakers, which will be opened. Our first speaker will be Mr. Johan Keith, head of the TLF Secretariat, who will be presenting about why is the TLFF needed and how does the TLGF work, how the two will work together. After this, we will have a presentation from Mrs. Lisa Ganassi, the CEO of ADM Capital Foundation, about the impact financing in Indonesia's current state. Furthermore, we will have views from the government. Originally, we were going to have Mr. S.B. Guritno, the Director of Innovative Funding Engagement, but he will be replaced by Ibu Novi Andriani. I will provide a short bio of everyone right before each one is presenting. This will be followed by an Environmental Fund Management Agency presentation by the head of it, Mr. Joko Hendrato. Furthermore, we will have views from the private sector of PT Royal Lestari from Mr. Jan Blau, followed by a presentation from Yayasan Bambu Lestari by Mr. Arif Rabik, the director. Each presenter will only be speaking very shortly for about 5 minutes. And this then will be followed by a short question and answer session. Before we will have following press conference where a number of invited journalists will be hosted. I would like to provide now the time, because we have very short time for such important discussion, to invite our first opening remarks from Ibu Valerie Julian, the resident coordinator of United Nations Indonesia. Ibu, okay. We will then, after the opening remarks, okay, sorry. The screen, we will have the housekeeping rules first. Thank you. Okay, I cannot hear. Yes, I'm sorry for the little glitch there. Housekeeping rules for all of us. We are encouraged to turn our video on with the webinar Zoom background and view using gallery mode. You are encouraged to display name Zoom with the following format: your name and your institution. Please mute your microphones. And the webinar will also be live streamed in the TLF YouTube channel and Kemitraan YouTube channel. Next rules, please, page. To use an English interpreter service, please press the English interpretation button at the bottom right of your monitor. Untuk menggunakan layanan penterjemahan bahasa Indonesia, silahkan tekan tombol menu interpretation dan pilih bahasa Indonesia. Jadi meeting kita ini akan bilingual, ada interpretation. This webinar will be recorded, and by joining this webinar session, participants automatically consent to recording. Finally, we can go directly now to during the last page of housekeeping rules. During panel discussion and questions, each panelist will deliver a 5-minute presentation. Participants are encouraged to type questions into the chat box. The organizer will inform link to download presentation materials at the end of the webinar. For any technical difficulties, please message host and co-host directly and notify of your technical issues. The team will work to resolve this with you. Finally, we will begin our dialogue with opening welcome remarks from Ibu Valerie Julian, UN Resident Coordinator for Indonesia. Selamat datang, Ibu. The time is yours, and yeah. Thank you very much.
Selamat siang, everybody. Thank you very much. Excellency Bapak Alu Dohong, Vice Minister of Environment and Forest. Sorry, I hear the interpretation at the same time, so I don't know what's happening. But anyways, Excellency Cameron Mackay, Ambassador of Canada to Indonesia and Timor-Leste, all of you, honorable speakers, as well as distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, Selamat siang. I'm very happy to be here on behalf of the United Nations. And I'm very happy to welcome you all to this webinar. And what an interesting webinar it promises to be, because indeed, we are gathered here today to discuss how can we make sure that working together, we have a brighter and greener future for Indonesia. And with the World Environment Day just around the corner, it will be on the 5th of June, it's really a timely occasion for us to highlight the necessary steps we need to take to ensure that we meet our sustainable and sustainability commitments. The past year has been quite an unprecedented one for all of us and for our planet, because the challenges that we have been facing actually underscore the irrefutable fact that we need long-term clean transition to tackle the climate crisis, to achieve sustainable development. Now, I must say, if we didn't know, COVID has really made us realize that we do need that. And science, solidarity, and solution must be at the forefront of every step we take to enable us to recover better from the COVID-19 pandemic, and that we come out of it stronger, but also wiser, that we have learned the lessons that COVID sent our way. Now, to foster a green recovery from COVID, it is really one of the main objectives we have right now at the United Nations. Because this pandemic, as I said, has really put some aspects of our lives on pause, but the reality, it has not stopped climate change. And in fact, last year, the Secretary General of the United Nations has appealed to all the leaders around the world to declare a state of climate emergency in their countries until carbon neutrality is reached. Now we are 5 years from the Paris Agreement, and the sirens that were there telling us that our planet is not doing so well are actually growing louder. The past decade has been the hottest on record. The Arctic Sea last October was at its lowest level ever. Apocalyptic fires, floods, droughts, storms have become the new normal. See in India, biodiversity is collapsing, deserts are spreading, oceans are warming. And that's something we must all be aware of. And in Indonesia, we are actually even more aware about this. Because you know that as per the Indonesia National Board for Disaster Management, there has been, for the first 3 weeks of 2021, 185 natural disasters. Actually, do you know that there is an average since the beginning of the year from about 200 to 250 disasters per month? So the science is very clear. Unless we cut fossil fuel production by 6% every year between now and 2030, unless we change the way we live today, as if the planet's resources were infinite, things will get worse. So recovering better from COVID means improving the lives of the most vulnerable who are the first to suffer from the impact of climate change. But it also means protecting the planet we all share. And what is very strange in this phenomenon is that it is so difficult to get the attention of the world on that. But we're getting there. So let us recognize that there are critical steps that actually Indonesia has taken for a more sustainable future. Indonesia's rate of primary forest loss have decreased for the 4th year in a row in 2020, according to the World Resource Institute. And actually last year was the lowest rate in 30 years. But in fact, last year, Indonesia dropped out of the top 3 countries for primary forest. And this has been thanks to a better fire monitoring and prevention, our agrarian and social forestry reforms that have eased poverty and encouraged more sustainable land use, and ambitious initiatives like the no deforestation, no peat, no exploitation commitment, etc. So I really want to applaud the progress that has been made. But at the same time, we should not forget that there is still a long way to go. Indonesia has made progress, but Indonesia still ranks 4th globally for primary forest loss. And recent studies actually suggest that while the national rate is decreasing, forestry loss in some biodiversity hotspots like Papua is actually accelerating as the agribusiness is moving east. So an ambitious and collaborative effort is a must if we are to reach our targets of reducing emission by 29% with national efforts and up to 41% with international efforts by 2030. So in addition to these pre-existing challenges, we know that for more than a year now, we have been battling a raging pandemic that has, among other things, driven the already marginalized groups even further into social exclusion. And one of these groups is actually the women, and particularly the women in the agricultural sector, who even before the pandemic were only earning around 64% of their male counterparts' average wage. That is, if they are employed at all. The lack of labor availability continues to be an issue for women living in rural Indonesia. So against these incredible challenges, we really need to unite our efforts to make the recovery from COVID-19 an environmentally friendly and socially inclusive one. And we need to ensure that while we build back greener, no one is left behind. The trillions of dollars that are needed to recover from COVID is actually money that we are borrowing from future generations. So let's make sure that we use those funds optimally, because we cannot use those resources to lock in policies that will burden future generations with an amount of debt on a broken planet. And that's why I'm so thrilled to be here today to listen to the panelists, to discuss the pivotal role that finance plays in resolving several of these environmental and social challenges. And it's also a pleasure to hear more about the Canadian contribution to the Tropical Landscape Grant Fund, which I'm sure will set the stage for many more initiatives of this kind. The $4.8 million donation will have a specific focus on rural livelihood and women, and it will contribute to the development of agriculture production businesses. It will reduce Indonesia's environmental impact, and it also will create 10,000 new employment opportunities. So thank you, Canada, on behalf of Indonesia, but also on behalf of the planet, because the more we work together, the more we help our dear planet. And I would like to finish by thanking the organizers of this event, of course, the Tropical Landscape Finance Facility, the Global Affairs Canada, and of course, my colleagues from UNEP, the United Nations Environment Programme, for bringing us all together here for this very important dialogue. Indeed, we have to continue to work together. It is the only way we can ensure that the future generation can thrive in an equal, sustainable, and green Indonesia. Terima kasih banyak.
Terima kasih banyak, Ibu Valerie, for such a, inspiring. You discussed the serious problems we have, but there's also so much hope in there. Terima kasih banyak, Ibu. For our second welcome, we will now provide the floor to His Excellency Cameron McKay. Please, the floor is yours, Your Excellency, for 5 minutes.
Ibu Chandra Kirana, thank you very much. Excellencies, Ibu Novi Andriani, Madame Valérie Julien, honorable speakers, ladies and gentlemen, Good afternoon, selamat sore, bon après-midi. It really is an honor for me to represent the Government of Canada at today's webinar, co-hosted by UNEP and the TLFF. I do look forward to a lively discussion on how impact financing, such as through the TLFF, can tackle climate change and biodiversity in Indonesia. I also want to bring attention to the newly operational grant fund window of the TLFF. As the anchor donor of the TLFF Grant Fund, Canada really is proud to be working with UNEP, the United Nations Environment Programme. Canada's support of 4.8 million Canadian dollars will assess the environmental, social, and governance risks and opportunities and increase the bankability of projects that stimulate green growth and improve rural livelihoods across Indonesia. Increasing bankability means more projects will be able to access long-term financing from private financiers and impact investors. It also means that projects will be able to attract further concessional financing and partner with other development actors, including civil society organizations. This concessional funding will allow projects to explicitly target and generate positive social and environmental impacts in their investments. Canada's investment in the TLGF is aligned with our feminist international assistance policy, which recognizes that environment and climate action are most effective when women and girls play an active role in designing, developing, and implementing strategic responses to climate change and environmental issues. Let me talk just a little bit more about the importance Canada places on addressing climate change through our international development assistance. As Valerie said, while fighting the pandemic is obviously a top priority for most nations at this time, climate change still threatens our collective health, our economy, our way of life, and indeed our planet. We need transformational financial investments to help communities around the world better address climate change and adapt to its harmful consequences. By fostering greener, more sustainable economies, we can help meet our collective climate objectives and address intergenerational equity. And that's why in 2015, Canada committed 2.65 billion Canadian dollars in climate finance for developing countries to implement mitigation and adaptation actions and to build their capacity to track progress. Indonesia is one of the countries that benefited from this $2.65 billion in climate financing, including via funds channeled through the Canadian Climate Fund for private sector in Asia, the Green Climate Fund, the Global Environment Facility, and the Forest Carbon Partnership Facility, among others. Projects include utility-scale solar and wind projects, geothermal development, and results-based payment in the forest and land use sector. The Government of Canada is now planning its next commitment, and we expect an announcement in the coming months. So why is our funding important? Well, achieving the goals of the Paris Agreement requires dedicated and sustained efforts from all parties, including governments, civil society, and the private sector. International public climate finance will have a crucial role to play in supporting a better recovery and transformation to low carbon and climate resilient growth. Canada's support of the TLFF's grant fund window is a great example, we think, of stakeholders working together to mobilize finance for climate goals. Canada's support aims to be catalytic in unlocking at least 50 million Canadian dollars of sustainable investments in tropical landscapes that adhere to green bond principles and the social bond principles. This, as Valerie mentioned, we expect will create up to 10,000 new jobs and avoid or sequester 5 million tons of CO2 greenhouse gas emissions within the next 10 years. Let me conclude by saying that Canada is keen to be part of TLFF's public-private partnership to help guide and scale sustainable investments for mitigating climate change through forest retention and restoration, sustainable agricultural product systems, and clean energy. We expect TLFF investments will support the government of Indonesia to meet its commitment of reducing emissions by up to 41%. Terima kasih banyak. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much.
Terima kasih banyak, Your Excellency, for I think between you and Ibu Valerie, you really helped to set the tone for our discussion to talk about how to bring the Paris Agreement to the ground, to the people and communities who are living in the forests and around the peatlands in Indonesia, and all of the stakeholders to figure out how we will be able to develop economically while protecting them and protecting the natural resources as well. This is a huge challenge. Watching, as someone working on the field, in the field, I have always been looking at TLF with real encouragement, but also have been seeing that big gap, which I hope now will be actually bridged with this support from Global Canada Affairs, and will set the ground for people who are disadvantaged in Indonesia in the future. So thank you very much. Before further ado, we will now go to the discussion, but before that, we will play a very short movie about what the TLFF has been working on so far and the impacts, and then I will give the floor to Pak Johan to deliver his speech on why the TLF is needed and how does it connect with the TLGF. Yeah, terima kasih. Thank you very much for the video. And now we will be listening to Pak Johan Kleef. He is not a new name to Indonesia's sustainable development scene. He's been in charge of managing the TLFF Secretariat since January 2021, but he's been involved in the UN RED and holding his position as UNEP Senior Technical Specialist for UN RED for a long time. He focuses on land use and green economy mainstreaming in development planning to address the drivers of deforestation, as well as work on improving the ability to address peatland fires and peatland management, both through facilitating stakeholder engagement as well as providing high-level policy advisory services. He successfully developed concept to mainstream REDD Plus in a green economy platform in Indonesia during his service as the Green Economy Unit Head of the UN Office for RED Coordination in Indonesia. He held a strategic position in Indonesia as CARE Deputy Country Director and an advisor to the USAID-funded Kalimantan Forest and Carbon Project, before appointed as UNDP Specialist on Sustainable Development and Climate Change in Vietnam, where he successfully supported the government in developing the Vietnam Green Growth Strategy. Pak Johan, the floor is yours. Terima kasih.
Bu Kiki, I would like to thank you for the introduction and for the opportunity here. But first of all, I would like to thank Ambassador Kemmerer, Ambassador of Canada to the Republic of Indonesia, and of course for the support to the TLFF Grant Fund. and as well the excellent cooperation we have had so far with Global Affairs Canada. And as well, I would like to thank Bob Valerie for, as the representative of the UN in Indonesia, I think for a very strong and powerful speech on the need for continued efforts globally as well as in Indonesia to tackle the problems of climate change, both in terms of mitigation as well as adaptation. So, and I will give a presentation on the Tropical Finance Facility Grant Fund. So, how the TLGF actually will actually enable us, but more project proponents, to actually get the project off the ground and operational and working. So, and as such, and as head of the Secretariat, I would like to thank also on behalf of the TLFF partners for everybody for their participation and their efforts. So, okay. Okay, let me then start with the slide. I think first of all, the TLFF and the things we have learned, but actually the TLFF aims to create and has established financing platforms that is applicable and scalable through a collaboration with private sector partners, development financing institutions, and donors, like Global Affairs Canada, to achieve an optimal risk-return profile for both companies and investors, and have then an environment and generate social impact. And there are effectively four key components of that platform, which are the grants, and the TLDF is one of these grant-making entities, which will enable promising concepts of projects through design support and technical assistance, which involves both economic and feasibility, but as well looking at social inclusiveness, and particularly how to include effectively, marginalized poor men and women of customary communities in Indonesia to take part of these investments, as already has, for example, successfully been achieved by our first project, Royal Lestari Utama. And then on text, after these grants are put in place and the project is developing, then the Catholic funding steps in a role actually to provide the guarantee to reduce the risk of both the investor as well the project proponent to move forward with projects. And then the third phase steps in, and that is bringing in the impact funds. I think as the ambassador already underlined, for example, is 4.8 million Canadian dollars support. We are aiming to mobilize about $15 million of impact finance to match the risk return profiles and due diligence capacity. This we work then with these partners to regularly issue ESG performance support. And the key role here is actually to purchase notes or actually to invest money in the project. That varies from degradable plastics to palm oil, through bamboo, and through all kinds of other richness the Indonesian landscapes and biodiversities can produce. And so this will actually secure the offtake and secure the financial viability of the investment, and then it will enable the investment to sustainably deliver those both the financial, economic, and social impacts. Okay, and so this is how that process then works out. So this is how what we have learned in TLFF, how we can go actually from a project through the development stage, where we use this public financing to a risk baseline stage, and then move towards this sustainable transformation financing and bank financing. And that is actually then the process of blended finance, just going from pipeline through a project that project then can enable Indonesia to deliver, for example, on its NDC target, its national identified contribution targets of where Indonesia aims to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions by 29%, of which, for example, the land use sector and particularly forestry and peatlands are an important part, and which then these projects will actively contribute to. And so what we're achieving here is actually by using through public financing, actually to deliver sustainable solutions at landscape level to deliver products through, I said, to global brands names, through customers globally worldwide. Because even as we know well in Indonesia, like for example for coffee, there is a growing demand for this type of products as more and more consumers are becoming aware of the need to consume commodities that will deliver both environmental and social impact to the producers. So, and then within the TLFF, so that's why you see within the TLFF, the grant fund plays a critical role in actually by bringing the key components together, and by bringing the project proponents, so the people with the ideas and the projects, to the investors, and by doing so, by enabling them the investments to be realized and to deliver to its promise of sustainable landscapes. And by doing so, creating a sustainable Indonesia in line with Indonesia's long-term national development plan. Okay, next slide. And in a very important component of this are for each project, so we will look at the environmental, social, and governance safeguards, which is the project proponents, which will include a high carbon value and a high conservation value assessment of the landscapes where they're working in it, and do then an in-depth environmental social impact assessment, as in line with Indonesian law, where it's known under its acronym AMDAL. And then look at land tenure, because in the Indonesian context, of course, land tenure is important, and because by acknowledging, by getting better view on land tenure, then it will enable, for example, smallholders to actively participate and produce it in these value chains, and also benefit from the value added these value chains can deliver to their livelihoods. And then through participating mapping within the landscape, we aim to engage men and women living and depending on these landscapes, and who are actually, by doing so, creating these landscapes through their agroforestry systems, through, for example, the rice production, and for example, it can be all kinds of other commodities, like for example rubber, in which rubber agroforests contain 80% of the forest of the biodiversity of adjacent primary forest. So these men and women are critical and very important. And in particular, I think it's important there to realize as well that particularly women nowadays are critical in that role, and as they take important decisions on the use of these commodities. I think one of the key examples, for example, you will hear more about, is, for example, the case of Flores, where we are working on a potential project with the Bamboo Foundation. As there, with many men engaged in migratory work, women play a critical role in managing landscapes. Okay, and by doing so, I think I hope you understand how it works, and how you understand that how we can multiply tenfold this investment of public resources from the Canadian government into actually sustainable investments, which will deliver to the men and women currently depending on these landscapes, by engaging them in high value chains. Okay, thank you very much for your attention. I would like to give the floor back to Bu Kiki, Bu Moderator.
Terima kasih, Pak Johan. Thank you very much. Participants, if you have any questions, you are welcome to write them down in the chat box. And I think it was a very clear presentation, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of answers to Keep our time short. We'll be going directly to Ibu Lisa Ganassi, Chief Executive Officer of ADM Capital Foundation. She will be presenting directly. Ibu, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ibu Chandra. Thank you to the Government of Canada for their catalytic support to the Tropical Landscapes Finance Facility. Ibu Valerie and Ambassador Maki, your words were poignant and much appreciated. So selamat siang all. ADM Capital is a private credit manager based in Hong Kong since 1998 with long, deep networks across Asia and about $2.5 billion under management. Next slide, thank you. We provide lending to SMEs across Asia, manage 2 funds with the IFC as cornerstones. I set up the ADM Capital Foundation for the 3 partners in 2006 in response to the environmental and social challenges accompanying the extraordinary Asian development story we all know over the past 2 decades: deforestation, excessive resource use, pollution, consequences for communities. TLFF, as you know, and you've heard this afternoon, is a joint venture of the ADM Capital Group, BNP Paribas, UN Environment and ICRAF, and it was established to leverage private finance for good. The objective was to develop projects from the capital markets or other private finance that would be commercial, but bring very clear social and environmental benefit to Indonesia. The objective also was that the project should be closely aligned with the government of Indonesia's poverty alleviation emissions reduction target agenda. Indeed, we estimate that Indonesia has a funding gap in excess of $20 billion for projects that support the country's climate and development commitments. In this, there is considerable sustainable finance opportunity for Indonesia. So in response to this opportunity, as you've been hearing, we set up the Tropical Landscapes Finance Facility, which looks to provide access to long-term credit for commercial projects with measurable impact. And the Tropical Landscapes Grant Fund, managed by the TLFF Secretariat in Jakarta and UN Environment, and of course seeded generously by Global Affairs Canada. And this will support the pipeline project design in the land use sector with a particular gender lens, a focus on gender equity and mainstreaming, which is also supported by government regulation and policy. Next slide, Bankit. Broadly, we see that in Indonesia, and regionally indeed, there exists an underdeveloped sustainable finance sector that will hamper Asia's ability to deliver on development goals. Southeast Asia generally is lagging behind global averages in terms of both the universe of sustainable investment managers and sustainable investment. According to the 2020 Global Impact Investor Network survey, 79% of the 1,419 impact investing firms surveyed were based in North America or Europe, compared with just 3% in Southeast Asia. From an asset allocation perspective, Latin America and Sub-Saharan Africa attracted 23% of impact assets under management, compared to only 3% for Southeast Asia. Furthermore, sustainable land use investment strategies struggle to gather financing, as they're often perceived, as we know, as carrying higher levels of risk than more traditional projects. Yet the land use sector represents an above average contribution to many regional economies and contributes disproportionately to greenhouse gas emissions from conversion of forests or peat to agriculture, which is a particular problem in Indonesia. TLFF then sees significant funding gaps for sustainable livelihoods. For example, we see that more than 500,000 hectares of smallholder plantations need rejuvenation and or replanting every year. Based on official data, Indonesia needs $1.6 billion of sustainable credit per year to meet smallholder replanting targets that have been set by the Ministry of Agriculture. And this, of course, also brings environmental benefit when paired with NDPE commitments on the part of the borrowers. It also promotes gender balance when gender is included as a factor in project development. So we can see a role for TLFF in supporting local finance institutions move toward development of ESG principles and sustainable products, in addition to playing a finance role, a straight finance role. We can see that we can help to build scalable impact investment opportunities where we can play a role across the commodity sectors. And finally, we see TLFF as a platform to help catalyze public-private partnerships for blended finance. And honestly, we believe partnerships in this sector are absolutely everything. So overall, just to sum, we see TLFF playing not only a role in direct finance, but also in supporting the ecosystem for sustainable development and impact investment. Next slide, please, Banky. So how does TLFF approach impact? You've heard a bit about this from Johan, but just to be very brief, TLFF manages projects, the IFC performance standards, as well as 6 core impact objectives that are relevant to the land use sector. And these include emissions reductions, empowerment and equality, improved rural livelihoods, sustainable supply chains, biodiversity, and landscape protection and pollution reduction. Next slide, please, Banky. 3 years ago, we launched TLFF1, which was the $95 million sustainability project bond for sustainable natural rubber in Jambi and East Kalimantan for Royal Lestari Utama. You will hear more about ROU later from Jan. Since then, we have spent time supporting that project with regard to its environmental and social objectives, evolving our pipeline of TLFF projects, studying the areas of best intervention, and building TLFF 2.0. The grant fund is an important aspect of TLFF 2.0 for us and will greatly facilitate our next transactions. We've also looked at how to fill the gaps we see in private sector impact financing for that missing middle, that area where ADM Capital has expertise, projects in the $10 to $50 million range. And that has led to the Asia Climate Smart Land Use Fund, focused initially in Indonesia and managed by ADM Capital. This, we believe, will complement the TLFF Capital Markets Financing Facility. The objective, to provide flexible capital where local banks have been reluctant to lend. We believe collectively with the TLFF partners, we have the investment and ESG impact expertise to drive competitive risk-adjusted returns, that we can leverage ADM Capital's multi-decade regional investment track record, as well as our deep regional networks for land use investments. And we hope that the ACLF will help validate climate smart solutions in Southeast Asia by crowding in capital. And we hope that we can build on our regional partnerships and synergies to crowd in expertise. We expect to deploy technology solutions, including fintech for lending and traceability to lower cost curves, rapidly scale and monitor impact, which are all critical. So we're really excited about this additional financing opportunity for TLFF, and indeed by the opportunities that the grant fund will bring. Terima kasih.
Thank you so much for the presentation. There is so much information in there, so much knowledge that I think a lot of Indonesian players will need to be able to delve in more deeply in the following years with the support of this Canada grant and TLGF, I'm sure. So thank you very much for that. From now, we will then continue to the presentation from Indonesia. Views from the Government of Indonesia, public-private investment. We will be having Ibu Novi Andriani on replacing Bapak Guritno. Ibu Novi is Deputy Director for Financial Engineering in the Indonesian Ministry of National Development in Bappenas. She is the She obtained her bachelor degree in law from the University of Indonesia and master's degree in law from the University of Melbourne. Prior to her current post, she was a legal researcher at Thessalonica and Partners, a paralegal at Shahir Yudaningrum Miranti Law Firm, and a policy planner at the Directorate of PPP Development in Bappenas. She was involved in the amendment of the presidential regulations on PPPs and a member of the legal teams of PPP operational guidelines, law on land acquisition for public interest, the Sunda Straits project, and the Kata PPI revitalization. Ibu Novi Andriani, the 5 minutes. Terima kasih banyak, Ibu.
Thank you, Ibu Chandra. Very good afternoon, everyone. Your Excellency Ambassador Cameron, Your Excellency Ibu Valerie from the UNRC, honorable speakers and distinguished guests. Thank you very much for having me in here. So after hearing from the other speaker, the previous speakers, I'm very keen to know how the TLFF would help deliver the sustainable infrastructure. So probably first I would like to explain to you that, next slide please, that in terms of from the macro perspective, the Indonesian infrastructure investment until 2024, we're going to need around 429.7 billion US dollars, where in order to fulfill these needs, the government could only obtain around 58% or around 240 billion US dollar. And there is still a huge gap around 180 billion US dollar or around 42%, where we are expecting to get from the private sectors. So it means the room for the investment from the private sector to help us in obtaining the needs for infrastructure investment is still quite huge. And in order to attract the private sectors, we already developed what we call as the public-private partnerships. And it's already started since 1998. And until now, we have around more than 10 projects that already being under operation, and the rest of it are still under construction and still under preparations. The next slide, please. If we are talking about the environmental, social, and governance, so in terms of our public-private partnership process, we already considered the environmental and social study in our stages. One of it is that the environmental and social study will be conducted during preparation stage. Moreover, this environmental and social study will also examine the significant impacts on the environment which resulted from the business plan and the activities through the environmental social analysis, or we used to call it AMDAL. So we see that there is a room for collaboration between the TLFF, because from the previous speakers, you mentioned that there is a collaboration between the private, DFI, and donors to achieve optimum risk returns and environmental social impact. So we see that when we are doing this environmental and social study, there's the room for collaboration with TLIF to improve our environmental and social study that will be done through the preparation stage. Next slide, please. In terms of the potential public-private investment through the PPP, we see that there is a potential implementation collaboration through corporate farming and also potential funding through blended financing. We have a few green infrastructure projects. One that is not one project, but we have several projects. There is supporting the clean energy, for example, like the waste to energy projects. We have a few projects using PPP schemes. And we also have a few urban mass transport projects. We also have an energy conservation project for street lightings. And we also have one agro-techno park projects, which is bundled with tourism projects. So those are a few examples of a green infrastructure project where we see that probably there is a potential funding collaboration through blended financing between the fund provided by DLFF and the PPP schemes. Next. As I mentioned before, aside from those green infrastructure projects, we also see there is a potential implementation for PPP project, especially in agriculture sectors. However, currently under the existing regulation, the agriculture sector hasn't been regulated that can be using PPP schemes. So we see that probably the corporate farming partnership could be one of the initiatives between the private sectors and the local government also and the local farmers. We will consider whether we can put the agriculture sector as one of the sector that is allowed to use PPP schemes. And then secondly is on the implementation of sustainable land use. This could be further analyzed in the environmental and social study during the PPP preparation stage, especially to enhance the implementation of green policies and to improve the safeguard standards. Especially, we will have a look on the how to support decreasing in the deforestation rate and the land conversion rate, because we also currently has been receiving a few proposals in order to utilize the forest and to develop the forest into tourism sites. We also want to encourage government and local community to conduct reforestations. And then the third one, there is a potential implementation through blended financing funds, which is a potential funding from carbon trade and also PPP project rating that will enable philanthropy funds as one of the potential fundings. So our anticipated outcomes of this potential collaboration is that we could create, improve, and having more sustainable infrastructure in Indonesia, which will support the SDGs goals and the Paris Climate Agreement. And we also anticipate to have a support implementation on sustainable land use by providing financial incentive to smallholder farmers, supply chain companies, traders, and finance institutions to systematically include climate and zero deforestation targets. At the end, the anticipated impacts will be to improve rural livelihoods, forest protection, and to stimulate sustainable economic growth in Indonesia. So I think that's all from the government side that we can give our perspective and our view. We look forward for the discussion. So I'll hand over to the moderator. Please, Ibu Chandra. Thank you.
I'm so sorry. Thank you so much, Ibu Novi, for your presentation. Our next speaker will be from BPDLH, the Environmental Fund Management Agency of the Ministry of Environment, Mr. Dr. Joko Hendrato. Wait a minute. Mr. Joko was born in Surakarta in 1961. He has been serving with the government of Indonesia for almost 32 years. Prior to being appointed as the head of Environment Fund Management Agency, he held the post of Director of Financial Management of Public Service Agency and the Director of Investment Management at the Indonesian Ministry of Finance. Pak Joko Hendrato obtained his bachelor degree in development from economics from the University of 11 Maret in Surakarta, master's degree in business administration from the University of Colorado, and the doctorate degree from the University of Indonesia. Pak Joko, the floor is yours. Thank you very much for being with us this afternoon.
Thank you very much, Chandra. First of all, we would like to thank you for UNEP, Canadian Ambassador, and all resources person, Pak John Keefe, Lisa, and others, for your concern over Indonesian, particularly how we should still how we should fill the gap of finance for land sector. Regarding the issue that we have discussing this afternoon, I would like to share our view and experience related to public-private investment as one of options to finance land sector. Here all, I think I should give the picture about the IF first. That was established in 2019 and starting to operate since June 2020. The IF is a government agency that has a mandate to manage environment fund support program or specific project and activity that support its overall objects to improve management and protection of the environment, including climate change target. IF is directed by 10 ministers to ensure that all environment program financed by IF is integrated program and not double funding. IF has a flexibility in managing funds, as correct. It's quite different with the organization of public, because IEF is public agency, so they have a flexibility in managing a fund, including to do fundraising and to deliver the fund into beneficiaries. IEF could collect the fund from levy on certain issue related to environment protection and deliver the fund back to a certain objective. IEF also has some instrument in delivering the program. The application of these programs will depend on scale and the risk of the project. Dear all, in running the role of the IEF, together with the bank custodian, will act as a trustee for private sector to combine the scheme by using some sources, including government fund. This design, I think, is some advantage that's covering us as an integral part of government. IEF could be as a trust fund, providing a good guarantee for investor. That can be configured by investor, I think. It's this funds-based solution that can offer it to investor as a guarantor. Second, as a government agency, IEF could provide low cost of fund, which gives significant impact of giving high rate return back to investor who join the project, because IEF has a fund that can be used flexibility, including to using as a sweetener, which can be used as a subsidy or can be used as a guarantor. The needs to climate finance to support NDC implemented during 2020 until 2030 is estimated around 461 trillion, or around 346 trillion per year. Referring to the budget taking on climate change between 2019-2020, the allocation of state budget is around 97.66 trillion rupiah for 2019 and 77.81 trillion for 2020. If we assume that the trend of allocation of state budget has not significantly changed, then a gap of climate finance need is quite big, which around 60 to 70%. So to reach the NDC target or Sustainable Development Goals target, we have to fill the gap by using some scheme. Inter alia is enhancing bilateral or multilateral cooperation, creating innovation financing, and mobilize private investment or applying public-private investment is another choice. In terms of public-private investment, which is aligned with issue discussed this afternoon, we would like to highlight several things as follows. Public-private investment will be an effective tool if used for promoting infrastructure investment or promoting project that has a good supply chain management. The second is the application of public in private investment should consider related government policy. As example, is government committed to contribute of global emission reduction, public-private investment should has no implication to the NDC target. Here are referring to the above characteristic that I mentioned before. Public-private investment in some cases is not attractive for private sector. I think this is we already know. Therefore, it is important to give a sweetener or incentive for private sector involved in the project, such as additional return over their investment, tax reduction or tax holiday, and other is easy of permission and etc. Additional return over the investment is one of possible and attractive approach. Of course, to implement this policy, we have to consider the source of fund for giving the additional return as incentive. One of the choice is levy on carbon that could be income stream or to giving additional return. that we still running for discussion. I mean, running for decision by the government right now. The initial fund source of IEF come from donor and state's budget, and from others investor also. Fund from donor is aimed to finance climate change measures. Another source of fund is state budget, which is aimed for financing reforestation activities. The fund comes from private sector on forestry sector levy. The fund could finance forestry sector activities, including forestry sector activities that giving impact to other sectors, such as renewable energy mix. Dear all, in line with the characteristics of environment fund managed by IEF in delivering the program or project using public-private investment focusing on projects such as refinancing for energy forest plantation to supply biomass power plant project in Merauke, managed by PT Selaras Inti Semesta as part of Medco Group, which is PT Selaras Inti Semesta as part Medco Group fulfill their energy needs by having their own biomass power plant, and IEF together with PT SMI support power plant project. Since the source of fund is reforestation fund, so IEF support the project in supply side. IEF support biomass plantation, fertilizer and harvesting activities. Meanwhile, PT Sarana Multi Infrastructure or PT SMI support the infrastructure development. The PT SMI is one of the special mission vehicle SMI under the Ministry of Finance, which is engaged in financing and preparing infrastructure project. The project has been implemented since 2019 and has a good performance in paying back the loan. Another example that we already have a activity together with the private sector is refinancing technology and ensure supply set of raw material for our farm project. The activity of our farm is plywood production. The refinancing is aimed to ensure the raw material of plywood come from supply applying sustainable forest management principle. At this point, the debtor has obligation to build capacity of communities in applying sustainable forest management in producing raw material. The owner of plywood invests on their operational costs and others. Dear all, I think IEF continue to develop a business model of public-private investment to attract private sector and support the government commitment, as well as to minimize the risk of project failures. One of the potential of business model to be developed in public-private investment is financing of energy forest plantation using community-based approach. The biomass generated from energy forest plantation could support government policy in developing renewable energy. Public-private investment by using community-based approach could reach to big objective. Community-based approach give directly positive impact to community since they could have new source of income from collecting and selling the biomass as feedstock to the power plants, and to ensure the amount of supply set. It could be used BUMD or corporate of a regional government as aggregator to collect the biomass from communities. At this point, power plant investor who has a contract with PLN or state electricity company could be as an off-taker. Further government objective in reaching the carbon neutral could be implemented in concrete way. I think there's two examples that we already done with our project with PPP so far. Thank you, and we do hope that we can discuss further regarding this issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pak Joko, for your presentation, for your talk. we will go directly now to the civil society perspective of, oh no, not civil society, business perspective of the views from the private sector. PT Royal Lestari Utama. Jan Blau, the CEO, will be giving us his presentation. To save time, I will not read your entire bio, Mr. Jan Blau, but the floor is directly yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Upiki. Good afternoon, Your Excellency Ambassador, Manan Valerie Vion, Pak Joko, and all the attendants. Good afternoon to you. So my name is Jan Blau, CEO of the PT Royal Lestari Utama. We are a joint venture of the Michelin Tire Company and Barito Pacific Indonesian company. Next slide, please. So what we want to do is, in fact, we have land in the Jambi region in Sumatra and also a concession in East Kalimantan. This is in total 88,000 hectares, and we want to, in fact, plant a sustainable natural rubber plantation. Okay, and so next slide, please. What is our vision? Is in fact to become Asia's pioneer, a leader in sustainable natural rubber. What does it mean, sustainable natural rubber? It means that we take care of the people living in that place on our planet. We take care of the product, but we should think of a certain profit to remain also sustainable. So you see here the picture of the ecosystem, meaning that we want to be a best practice rubber production, but fully integrated with the community. It means that we work with the communities, with community partnership programs in order to increase the livelihoods of the people. We want to protect the forest and the animals in that forest. So we have dedicated conservation teams. And we, of course, we want to have a high yield per hectare at the end. Then next slide, please. So you have to see this as a sustainable rubber plantation, where in fact the end products will go to our the Michelin tire factories, but it is to do about how do you build a sustainable plantation. So we want to plant in total 34,000 hectares of rubber, leading at the end, giving around 10,000 jobs to people, including community partnership programs. We have also a processing factory in East Kalimantan. But in fact, the concessions in Jambi and in Kalimantan, they are positions, their positioning is against national parks. And in these national parks, there live elephants, tigers, as you see here on the picture. We want to protect them. So we have also a 9,000 hectare conservation zone against the Bukit Tikapulu National Park in Sumatra, in order to create this buffer zone and to avoid further encroachments of the zone, so that the forest and the animals are protected. Next slide, please. So we have a certification, well, you can see it here on the slide. So we have multiple certifications about sustainable production forest management. So it's a combination of forest management and plantation management. Next. In order to do this, how do you do this? Because the shareholders, they have put in a certain amounts of money. But if you know that to be able to grow 1 hectare of rubber from zero to maturity, So we talk about cost of maturity. It's about $10,000 per hectare. It means when you do 34,000 hectares, you need 340 million. And that's only for the rubber plantation. It's not yet within including all the conservation work we do and the improvement of the livelihoods of the people. So here we were able to create with TLFF stakeholders. We were able to create a first corporate sustainable bond of $95 million. That is, these bonds have been sold to impact investors and also by USAID. And that means this is, it came to a loan of 95 million to RLU and its subsidiaries in order to grow the number of hectares in the plantation. It is divided between, let's say, plantation work and conservation work. Next slide, please. And also to come back one other word to TLFF, you have to understand that there was no bank that was able to finance this. So the consortium within TLFF, they have helped us creating this bond so that a project like this can be financed. Otherwise, it would just not be possible because a commercial bank will never give you a loan on 15 years base. And so this was, and the shareholders, they have put in their efforts. But of course, in a company, you need a good balance between internal capital, shareholder capital, and external capital. So here you see the two concessions. In fact, the three concessions, two in Jambi, 18,000 hectares planted. But you see more than 20% of this concession is dedicated to conservation. We have a joint cooperation with the Bukit Decouple National Park to protect the buffer area, to avoid that the elephants, the orangutans are hurt, so we protect them. And then on the right side, you see the same in East Kalimantan. You see this is only from the 19,000 hectares that is this concession, only nearly 5,000 is planted. The rest is conservation. The next, please. So it repeats a bit what I've said. We have a wildlife conservation zone for about 10,000 hectares with rangers, with ranger patrols. We see a lot. We have about 200 elephants in that area. So you see, out of the area, there is more than 30% of the area is used for protection and biodiversity. Except, so apart from the rubber trees, we plant native trees. So in time, from the start of 2015, we planted 11 million hevea, so natural rubber trees, that will need 7 years to mature. And then we have also more than 3,700 native trees planted to preserve the area. And we have our own internal nursery dedicated to restoration. Next slide, please. So here are some pictures of the conservation activities, the patrols in the national park areas, the training to the rangers, the elephants, and the Sumatran tigers that you can see, the orangutans. They're all in this very biodiverse environment. This Bukit Decouple National Park has the highest biodiversity in the world, so we need to protect this. And it was a real objective of the Michelin company and of the Barito company to show this as a sort of a front-running project to show the world that it is possible to do a sustainable project, and is including the improvement of the livelihoods of all the people. On that area, we have 50,000 people living. Okay, so it's not so easy to handle. It's not just planting trees and harvesting. It is working with the communities and creating relationships and working together. Next slide, please. Okay, some other important data. We are very lucky to have more than 30% of our people, mainly in the tapping and in the general services in the plantation. We have 30% women working for us. As you understand that in this area there was not much facilities, so we created a lot of housing also. And the optimum for us is when we have a house that we call a G10, has 10 doors. What we would like is to have, in fact, in each door a family with two parents and two children, and in fact both parents, they work for us as a tapper or in another job, but that we provide work and livelihood for all those workers. Okay, next slide. Yeah, even the president has given us the certificate of the Forestry Partnership Program, a decree from the Ministry of Environment, handed over by President Jokowi. We have 9 forest farmer groups of 200 farmers with total area of 600 hectares. They work with us. We buy their products, so we can help them in creating new agroforestry, new crops, but also like rice, coffee, chili, the fishing. So it's helping to improve their livelihood, and the company is buying their goods, in fact. So it's a win-win situation. The average farmer there has increased its salary with 25%. Next. Yeah, what we thrive also in Barito and in the Michelin company. It's very important to strive for gender equality. From the past, of course, the workers were the men and the women stayed at home. But we are very lucky in that area of Jambi. We have a high participation degree of women, and they are if you compare the women, they score very high in the tapping quality of their work, and we are really very fortunate to have them in our workforce, and giving them also the chance to develop to management positions. Next. I've come to an end of this presentation. What I didn't mention, of course, is that there's so many partners in TLFF, and they help us. In fact, all the companies you see here on the sheet, they help us in being sustainable, and to become this first sustainable rubber plantation in Indonesia. So I want to thank them, everybody, and the TLFF. The financing has been a very let's say positive help and support, and all the partners as well. So thank you very much, and thank you for your attention.
Terima kasih banyak. Thank you so much, Jan, for your presentation. We are really running late of time, so we will go directly to the next. There are a lot of questions for you. We will go to the next presenter. Last but not least, Ibu Monica Tanu Handaru. She is presenting on behalf of, or in replacement of, Arif Rabik, She's one of the founders of the Environmental Bamboo Foundation, Yayasan Bambu Lestari. The floor is yours, Ibu Monica. Terima kasih. Hello.
Thank you, Chandra. I'm going to be very brief, straight to the point. I'd like to share a different way of working on this and the Environmental Bamboo Foundation, our initiative to set up, can we have the next slide? Our Bamboo Village initiative is basically working on the Bamboo Village level of bamboo agroforestry. We chose to work with, at the village level, of course, with our, principle of people first, public, private, and of course, partnership for profit. And we've had a successful model and stories in the area of district of Ngada in NTT. And then we're trying to use that to build more expansive, but at one step at a time to do 7 districts of Ngada, working with the women farmers. Can we have the next slide? Next slide. So for us, it's actually empowering farmers is key. The current state or the past practice of the villagers are the quickest ways and practical ways to burning, of course, and then there's a silver bullet of commodities and top-down program. Different commodities people are asked to plant without knowing what is for them, and so the easiest way is to sell, of course, raw, unprocessed. So we want a different way of dealing with the farmers. So with the Bamboo Village models, farmers are trained at the low external input agroforestry system, more profitable long-term, maybe not in short-term. Bamboo agroforestry itself, because the bamboo is only 1/3 maximum of in a landscape, and the agroforestry is and the forest itself is the rest, the 2/3. So we want to encourage diversification of forest products. So that's basically for different cash flows. Value addition at the village level. Value addition at the village level through maybe a pre-processing factory to increase farmers' income, whether it's a cooperatives or other business institutions or groups that they will develop by consensus. So that's basically what we encourage. So that's where these public funding or public sector money can also contribute. Farmer cooperatives with direct access to markets, basically to give them, protection towards exploitation of price and supply. Next slide. Why bamboo? Of course, people ask us why bamboo. Basically, bamboo is a sustainable timber of the future. We know that there is now 10-story, 30 stories building, 80% made from bamboo. So paper, textile, fiber, renewable energy source. So it restores landscape, versatile in the end use, rapidly renewable. Our bamboo grows 4 times faster than China. It's basically cost effective, empower communities, and I would also add it's part of the Indonesian culture. Next slides. Just to give you an example of bamboo agroforestry, why it improves village and land resilience. So it's a diversified forestry assets in one landscape. It's a year-round harvest. You can harvest them anytime. But we have a system in the Environmental Bamboo Foundation, which is basically a sustainable bamboo harvest. It increased forest productivity because the combination of different crops in combination with bamboo. This is just to give you an example of bamboo clump and jackfruit, albizia. So these are the way that bamboo agroforestry looks like. Next slides. So one village level value addition ensures long-term business and of course economy. This is just to give you an example. One bamboo village model, it's 7 cooperatives, 210 households, 200 hectares, 2,000 hectares, 100 kilotons of CO2. They can produce 21 tons per day. That equals its factory. We can enable them and to provide efficient supply value chain and has a low capex and opex. In our story in Ngada, we were able to double the household productivity and empower villages. I would add one more. We do have a baseline, the indicator of our contribution to sustainable development goals and also gender equality. Next slides. So these basically are the scheme of our ideas of building Bamboo Village Initiative. Is still people first. It's the village preparedness, improve, ensure strong village institutions in the process of building bamboo the bamboo villages. The public can also provide fundings for support, such as power source, renewable power source, or roads, building, communication. In fact, capacity building as well. We just got a commitment from the East Nusa Tenggara government this year. They will fund about $1 million for just to work with women farmers to make bamboo seedlings, and that's just for this year. Private, of course, they can have support the investment of the investment itself and also the factory, and also equity. Next slides. So we find this is going to be the last one, I promise. 6 solutions pathways to activate bamboo villages. We've defined this left and right and looking around based on our 3 years experience. One is there is a need to strengthen the drivers for investment in bamboo. Bamboo is not a popular commodity, Sin. Okay, people many times ask us questions about, so how profitable it is, how good is it for an investment? So this is something that we need to work on. The second is to grow a network of resilient bamboo villages. It comes from, it starts from mapping the potential of bamboo, where the bamboo is located. Is it near villages? Is there land? Is there a transportation or access road or pelabuhan or harbor? Then we look at how is the bamboo, what do you call it, kesehatan, or whether it's maintained or.
Hello.
Something that we work on, condition of the bamboo. At the moment, we've identified as certain areas like South Sulawesi, Central Sulawesi, West Kalimantan, Central Kalimantan, East Nusa Tenggara, and parts of West Nusa Tenggara. We built the digital business solution for the bamboo forestry, meaning from forest to factory is digitalized. Meaning that everything transaction is to be transparent and accountable, is traceable to. Ensure market access through sustainable certification. Of course, there's a need for any bamboo products and end products. There is a need for FSC certification if it's for the global market. Govern the bamboo agroforestry value chain. In time, I think if there's enough large substantive supply of bamboo, we do need to have some sort of a governance of the bamboo value chain. I can't imagine it would have millions of tons of bamboo coming in production. So we do need to govern the bamboo agroforestry value chain. The last one I want to is the strengthening public sector support. At the moment, the government the government had a national strategy in 1997 during Pak Sarwono when he was the minister. Now we're renewing the national strategy, which is a national strategy to support bamboo village level industry. Next one. I think this is the last one. Thank you. Our goal is, of course, to build 1,000 bamboo villages, and this is as a part of a not a commercialized, fully commercialized, but this is a movement. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica, for the presentation. Bamboo is a very important topic. There's actually in Sumatra, I found that they are actually buluh bamboo, padang buluh bamboo. So naturally for existing bamboo forests already. So it would be really wonderful for that kind of landscape to be included as well as the ones that are being restored. But we've run out of time, so I'm taking us all to the question and answer session. Terima kasih banyak. I would really like to thank participants as well as speakers who have been actively questioning and answering questions through the chat facility here. So because we've run out of time, I will be reading the questions that have not been discussed yet to be responded to. There's a question from Peter Dehan from the Borneo Initiative for Ibu Novi Andriani, who mentions in her last PowerPoint that PPP can be co-funded through carbon trade. Would this be carbon trade on the local Indonesian market, or could this be VCS or other international mechanisms, Ibu? So that's a question for you. One more question is from Jens Zymanska. Please forgive if I'm pronouncing your name wrongly. The CEO of Latex Form Technology BV, Netherlands, Germany. And he says we're planning 2 projects which will sequester 146,000 tons on CO2 every year through the processing of natural latex from Indonesia rubber plantations. Could this be considered related with carbon trade? Whom to talk to in TLFF? Because on the website he did not find direct contact, only generic one. There's been questions from Darto from SPKS, but I see that there's a lot of discussion already in the chat box. There's also a very interesting question, discussion about agroforestry and how RLU is combining plantation and conservation. I would actually like to add a question there. There's already a robust dialogue, but my question would be, do you have an intermediary approach in the landscape between the conservation and the plantation? Because I know, at least in Jambi, that the communities traditionally still have a lot of very complex agroforest systems that are needing a lot of assistance to be able to develop income from the plants that they already have there. And this kind of complex agroforest system could actually play a role, I think, in your kind of work. But I only see that there's this, it's almost like you have distinction between conservation on one hand and plantation on the other. And where is the role of agroforestry beyond the initial years of rubber plantation? So those are the questions that we need that came up. There's been a lot of discussion, and due to time, I think we will stay to these questions. And Ibu Nofi, maybe you can begin in addressing the question to you. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Ibu Chandra. I will be trying to answer to Pak Peter de Haan's question from the Borneo Initiative. So currently, we're still developing the mechanism, so I cannot answer yet whether this carbon trade will be on the local Indonesian market or could be also through VCF or other international mechanism, because we just review one project in waste to energy projects, and we've been discussing this with the World Bank about the possibility to co-funded this project through carbon trade. So it's still under discussion, unfortunately, for the carbon trade. So I think that's my answer, Ibu Chandra, for Pak Peter de Haan's questions.
The next question, I guess, is the one that goes to from Jens from Latex Foam. This is addressed, I think, to TLFF. Yeah.
The address is in the chat box, so we can skip beyond that one.
Yeah. The question is not about the address, but it is. The question is, could this be considered related with carbon trade? So shall we skip this one?
Kiki, I think that question, because it's quite specific, and then I will reply. We reply that separately by email.
Okay.
I think it is quite an interesting initiative.
So I see. Okay, so that one will be answered by email.
Because these are more opportunity related. So.
Okay. If this is the case, actually, almost all of the questions have been answered in the chat, in the chat facility here. There's one final one, but we have already run out of time. I think more questions can be addressed to communications@tlffindonesia.org. Finally, before we close this meeting, I would like to ask everyone to put on open their video screen so that we can have a group photo. Okay. Have we had the photos yet? Please advise if this is done.
I think we can assume that it's.
I think we have, yes, okay. Thank you very much. I also have a message here that, okay. We are canceling the event, the media briefing event, but I would really like to ask Your Excellency, Ambassador Cameron McKay, to please provide us with a closing statement, as well as Ibu Valerie from Valerie Julian. Can you please provide us with a closing statement? Thank you very much. Ambassador, may I please give you the floor for the
Yes.
first closing statement?
Thank you very much. I will be very brief. This has been a fascinating webinar. Thank you for allowing me to participate. I will say that Indonesia, as we all know, is home to some of the planet's most important biodiversity hotspots. And that's why Canada is so keen to continue its collaboration with the government of Indonesia, civil society organizations, private sector investments to tackle the interdependent crises of biodiversity loss, ecosystem degradation, and climate change. So we really are proud to be the anchor donor of the TLFF grant fund, as we've discussed today. And we're confident that our partnership with the TLFF will help to guide and scale sustainable investments for mitigating climate change through forest retention and restoration, sustainable agricultural production systems, and clean energy. Thank you very much. Terima kasih banyak.
Terima kasih banyak, Your Excellency. The next, Ibu Valerie Julian, can you please provide us with a closing remark before we end this meeting? It's very late, I know. We've run late.
That's okay. Thank you very much. I will be brief as well, mostly to say that I agree. It has been a very interesting discussion on a very interesting subject. And the fact is that, what we do as UN, what we all do to support this issue, it's actually not a generous move. It's a move to save ourselves, because if we let the planet go bad, we just are, I would say, sowing the branch on which we are sitting, if I can do that metaphor. So it's really not a generous move, it's a must. We must do that. It's a must. So I'm very pleased to see that there is so much energy around the table, the virtual table, and a lot of ideas, and that this facility exists as well to support countries like Indonesia, because Indonesia indeed is essential also because of its biodiversity, the size of its forest, and so on and so forth, is essential for the well-being of the entire planet. So I'm very glad to participate and to see that there are so many ideas around the table. And as UN, will continue to support this. And again, thank you to all of you. Thank you, Ambassador, for the support of Canada to this initiative. That's so much appreciated. Thank you very much. Terima kasih banyak.
Terima kasih banyak, Ibu Valerie Julian. Thank you very much for UNEP and also for TLFF, Johan, and everyone who has been behind this meeting, all of the participants for staying so long. Minta maaf, I'm so sorry if there has been, if I've gone over time and there's been quite a few hiccups in the process. Terima kasih, selamat sore.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thank
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Terima kasih.
Bye-bye.
Terima kasih banyak.
Have a nice weekend.
Thank you all.
Terima
Yeah.
kasih. Aduh.